this morning, President Trump, his trade war with Canada is turning into a culture war, or perhaps a war of words, you could say. Yesterday, the president
war of maps, even.
War of maps. Yesterday, the president signed an executive order renaming Lake Ontario to Lake America.
The lake change, Lake of America, was something I've been thinking about for a long time, actually. So if you think about it, we have a Gulf and we have a lake. Now all we need is an ocean.
The change would only apply to the federal government's official recognition, but Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke out against the move. On social media, he wrote that the name Ontario is older than both the United States and Canada. The word comes from the indigenous Wendat people, meaning Great Lake. Did not know that.
Now we know.
So to discuss, let's bring in CBS News congressional reporter Taurean Small. So Taurean, I mean, it's semantics, right? As Shakespeare said, what's in the name, you know? But what is in the name? Like, why is this so important that the president is making this choice?
Yeah, I think outside of that really poignant history lesson that Carney gave us there, I found most striking that President Trump said that he wasn't really looking to send any particular message in this renaming. This is something that he floated obviously at the height of tensions between negotiations around trade talks with Canada. But ultimately, though, he wanted to shift the conversation when pressed on why he was going forward with this to what he saw as an ongoing thread of Canada ripping off the United States. This is what he had to say in the Oval Office yesterday.
We lose on average over the last 15 years $60 billion a year carrying Canada, so we just can't do it anymore. We love the people of Canada. I don't think their representatives do an appropriate job. Maybe they'll change. I really don't know. I mean, we can't let the whole Canadian thing that's been going on for decades, and it has to come to a stop.
I think what would be increasingly difficult for President Trump to come to terms with is the fact that he renegotiated under his first term the North American Free Trade Agreement, and that eventually became USMCA, that trilateral deal between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. As we've heard from a number of Canadian officials, this is a clear signal that trade relations and just allyship moving forward between the two nations will look significantly different, whereas we have long had this friendly, competitive, but still cordial relationship with our neighbors of the North, and now looks like it's going to be considerably icy.
And Taurean, Canada announced its own retaliatory tariffs up to 50% on U.S. goods. And to Adriana's point, the question so many people have is, so what's the point of renaming the lake? What's the point of the trade war? Is this putting any political pressure on Republicans as we approach midterm elections and voters tell us inflation is what they're most worried about?
Yeah, and we've heard from Republicans already who have made it clear that they just are not aligned with President Trump on this escalation. Susan Collins of Maine, who has been in this really tough re-election battle, has to come to terms with the fact that her opponent, now Troy Jackson, is using this against her, and this is something that she's called a mistake. But also, we got to look at other really critical races, like the race for the now open Michigan Senate seat. El Said is definitely using this against Mike Rogers, who has defended the president on his tariff policy, but now considering the symbiotic relationship between Ontario and Detroit, for example, about $1 billion in goods traded between that port every day, the water that shares those two borders, is something that most likely will be used heavily by Democrats against Republicans looking to at least hold the balance of power that they have in the Congress.
All right, Taurean Small in our D.C. bureau this Friday. Taurean, thank you very much.